on News 5 Live. On the heels of an agreement with the government to forego increments, the Public Service Union and the Belmopan City Council reach a settlement. The City Council has allocated a parcel of land in exchange for the hilltop property. We'll get the view of the churches on why in-person services are still not allowed. The Caribbean Union of Teachers has reservations on the holding of CSEC examinations in July. Belize is now the only country on the American mainland with no new cases of COVID-19. And the land grab in Cotton Tree, News 5 looks at the expansion of the village and the frustrations of acquiring property near Belmopan. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
Yeah, where to go?
You walk, my dog?
Yeah, at the car.
Everybody has that one loyal friend.
Prince, you could pick up the girl for me?
Check on.
I could borrow your tennis.
Just one credit, please.
evening. Welcome to News 5 Live for Tuesday, May 19th. I am Marlene Cuellar. The Public Service Union and the Belmopan City Council have buried the Hilltop hatchet. They've reached a settlement in the form of another piece of property. Today, the PSU says that they have received a prime location and good value in the agreement that will be signed later this week. As you recall, the PSU and Belmopan City Council have been at odds because the council sold the Hilltop property in Belmopan right from under the union's nose. The matter was later taken before the courts, and the terms of this agreement came out of the mediation. When we spoke with First Vice President Dean Flowers today, we asked him about this settlement, which comes days after the union agreed to forego increments as part of cost-saving measures with the government. So did the union give in to get a headquarters? Here's what he has to say about the matter.
There was a case filed against the Belmopan City Council for what we deemed to have been an unjust or unlawful disposal of the Hilltop property. As a result, we entered into some mediation, and I'm pleased to report that the PSU and the Belmopan City Council has reached an amicable agreement out of court as settlement to what we believe was a wrong done to the union.
Now, when you say settlement, are you able to share anything of what that entails?
Well, I think in summary I can say that we have been offered an alternate piece of property. We're satisfied with the location of that property. We're satisfied with the value of that property, and we look forward to moving forward in establishing a head office and to carry on the business of the union. We are working out the final details of the agreement. It is my humble view that the agreement should be signed off on before the ending of this week, and then we can part ways, and then, of course, notify the courts that we are withdrawing the matter.
I know that it's been something that has been sort of, drawn out for a while, and it seemed that you guys were unable to reach an agreement. What do you think made this possible?
What made it possible was, I believe, the excellent work done by the Council for the PSU as well as the Council for the Belmopan City Council. I must commend them for the excellent work that they did in arriving at a settlement that both parties are amenable to. And like I said, the PSU primary role and objective is to protect the interests of workers and to ensure that the terms and conditions under which they're employed is acceptable. We're not in the business of litigation, and we're not in the business of jogging on fights, especially with entities such as the Belmopan City Council, which has little or nothing to do with workers that we represent.
Did that in any way influence your decision as it relates to, the matters with the PM?
Absolutely not. Two completely different set of negotiations and two completely different parties with whom we were in negotiations. So one had absolutely nothing to do with the other.
And then now you have this happening just days later. You don't think it gives sort of an impression, or it leaves it open to multiple interpretation by the public?
I think that that isn't the case. I can say that for months the Public Service Union has been in discussions with the Belmopan City Council, even before COVID-19. And so the fact that we're this close to signing off on an agreement where Hilltop is concerned, which happens coincidentally with within the time frame in which we reach an agreement with government where the increment is concerned, it's mere coincidence.
Since the start of the state of emergency, the churches have been meeting online for services to prevent any contagion of the novel coronavirus. Stay-at-home orders, the cap on gatherings of no more than 10 persons, as well as social distancing means that, for now, church pews cannot be filled by churchgoers. The ease of state of emergency restrictions, however, has triggered debate among the faithful. There is an outcry that public transportation can now operate even though social distancing guidelines, as well as the limit on the number of persons on buses, are not in practice. But churches are still not allowed to open their doors wide enough to fellowship. News 5's Sani Cayetano has the perspective of the Catholic Church.
The church is about 2,000 years old, which means the church has been through many storms before, and trials, and she has weathered them. And so we have been able to deal with these issues, realizing that it's for our own good. And we have been able to make sacrifices.
Across the country, churches and other places of communal worship have been all but abandoned. It's not that parishioners aren't eager to return to daily or weekly service, but certain limitations on crowd sizes would essentially force celebrants to become selective of their congregation. Amid these COVID times, social distancing is very important. However, implementation should also be rational and proportionate.
There will be a church or place of public worship in any facility or public place which involves the participation of any member of the general public or a congregation is allowed to operate under the following conditions. No care how big the church, it can't have more than 10 people. So your church could be the size of Civic, you still can't have more than 10 people.
In the context of social distancing, physical space among persons in a queue, open space, or an enclosed environment must be maintained at all times. The requirement as it stands is for no less than 6 feet. At Novelos bus terminal this morning, passengers on board a commuter bus headed out of Belize City to other parts of the country, each seated less than 6 feet apart in either direction. That is now acceptable, providing that face mask is worn at all times. Here at St. Joseph Parish, the pews remain empty because Father Noah Leslie is only allowed to administer to a flock of only 10.
I saw that number as being too limited, and I did consult with some of my parishioners about the whole matter, and some of them said, you know what, just continue to live stream the masses and not have the weekday mass that we normally would have, because that would create a bit of confusion about who should be invited and so forth. So I believe that actually it should have been where, depending on the size of your structure, you have a small structure, then you use your wisdom and say, okay, we'd only allow so many people. The government could have laid down the regulations concerning that, about how many people spend, depending on the size of your structure. If you have a large building, again, you don't want large numbers, but a reasonable amount of people could have been invited to come and participate, like say maybe 50 or so, or 60, and they'll be spaced out, practicing social distancing, wearing their masks, and so forth.
In most parishes, the Catholic Church in particular, attendance at Mass has been suspended since mid-March. With the gradual relaxation of the state of emergency, we've seen where other facilities have been opened up with guidelines to be adhered. The Church, in the opinion of many, should have been given similar directions.
Remember we said for the shops, the amount of people who could go into the shop depends on the size of the shop. Now in this case, look how big the church big. No more than 10 people. And if your church that small and can hold people, 10 people, so that they can be 1 pair of feet apart, then you can't hold 10 people. Because the social distancing laws and the protocols will trump anything that these allow you to do.
Social distancing, for all intents and purposes, is an exercise in basic math, calculating the space between persons in a given area. In observing the empty church, the pews can be calculated to reflect the distance each congregant would be away from his nearest neighbor. This can easily go up to 60 or 70 persons.
The way it is right now, you have a restaurant which is an enclosed structure, and some are open, of course, and you have buses and so forth. And again, you allow so many people in those and in these enclosed places, whereas in our churches, the windows are wide open and everything else, doors are wide open. some of us have our auditoriums and so forth. We could have chosen to use our auditoriums for worship, and our people have been quite flexible to be ready to use such facilities. So yes, I believe that yes, the numbers could have been increased depending on the size of the structure that you have.
As a result of COVID-19, certain key features of the Mass have also been foregone, including the sign of peace as well as the Holy Communion. The Church, for the time being, has been forced to adapt to the changes brought about by the coronavirus pandemic, and while it is represented on the National Oversight Committee, it begs the question of whether these decisions were made rationally.
I'm not vexed with we don't know, because the church people they sit down on the National Oversight Committee. So this is what was agreed to.
Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
While locally, the BNTU and PSU have reached agreement with the government to forego increments, there's a storm brewing involving regional exams. That is because despite opposition in the region, the Caribbean Examination Council, with the nod from the Council of Human and Social Development, is standing by its decision to hold the examinations in July. Today, the Caribbean Union of Teachers placed on record its concerns, saying that, quote, "This unfortunate decision places the lives of thousands of students and teachers at risk, as all the issues surrounding the administering of the examinations have not been addressed," unquote. The CUT had written to the registrar of CXC, saying that this position was reached after it engaged member units which were vehemently opposed to the July exams. The Belize National Teachers Union forms part of the CUT, and today, National President Elena Smith says that the CUT has the full backing of the BNTU.
In normal circumstances, teachers have a hard time getting students to submit their SBs. That has always been an issue. It has always been an issue too, maybe in some areas more than others, where students sign up for these exams, and maybe because 6 of them are being paid for by government, so they sign up for them, and if there are subjects that they don't really like or they don't have interest in, they don't show for these exams. So imagine now where they are now going online, teachers having to try to get SBS from these students. They are not on the online classes. They absent themselves from these classes. They are not submitting their work via the online methods that have been given to them. And so a lot of them will have missing documents, missing papers to submit. And so then that would mean then that at the end of the day, when this exam is scheduled for July, that these students will be at a disadvantage because they wouldn't have had other work submitted, uploaded, all of these things. So it's unfair to the students. We are still in the same situation. They are still at home. They still have the same stress. They have been less prepared now than they would have been if they were in the classroom. So we don't understand. We can't see how is it that we got to this point so quickly to say it's going to be held in July now, as opposed to what we were proposing to them August or September.
The regional union says that it has seen no evidence of any action plan by ministries of education in the region, which suggests that they have adopted any approved set of standards specific to the reopening of school. Elena Smith agrees.
In Belize, we have not yet come up with what would be the necessary things to have in place for schools to reopen. There was a discussion just on Monday with Dr. Manzanero and ministry, union, managements, and other persons to look at what would be some parameters that we would need to have it put in place before we could consider reopening of schools. And so then, having had that discussion, asked those questions, and having been given some idea of when would be the best time to reopen schools, the advice given was certainly not July. So if it is that we are having our students physically sit an exam, it means that they must go to school. So how will that work if we are not yet prepared for that to happen? And if the advice coming at this point in time, at that meeting, coming from the Ministry of Health personnel, was that we would be able to open not July, but after then. So the two, they're not matching. So I don't see how we can agree on a date for exam even before we met with the Ministry of Health officials to discuss what would need to be in place to reopen schools. Us as a country, we should be the ones to dictate to CXC when we are prepared for that exam, not the other way around. And so, again, for the Ministers of Education and the ministry personnel who attended that meeting and who accepted to have the sitting in July without even properly consulting with the key stakeholders, the union, the actual teachers who will be with these students who are teaching them right now, the fourth form teachers, and to just say, yes, we will go ahead, without even having things properly put in place. You know, it makes you wonder what was the reasoning behind accepting such a date.
The Caribbean Union of Teachers is calling on the governments of the region to be mindful not to rush the process for the reopening of schools to facilitate the writing of CXC examinations, unless they have instituted all measures outlined by the reopening of school protocol. The desire to own a parcel of land sent hundreds of persons out to mile 44 on the George Price Highway. Activist Nigel Petillo, formerly of Big Year, has identified 2,500 acres of arable land whose owner is now deceased. Petillo promises to parcel off the property at an acre for each person. The gathering on Sunday did not end well for Petillo, but it brought out the consistent want for and the frustrating process to acquire land. News 5's Isani Caetano reports.
As Belizeans, we need to understand the importance of land. I have always spoken and said that land is the solution to poverty. Proper land management is the solution to poverty. A lot of people don't understand it.
Land ownership and tenure are both measures of wealth and marginalization, particularly in rural communities. The size of land holdings is often used as a proxy for income or wealth, while land tenure status can be used to prevent small farmers from consolidating power. On the fringes of Cotton Tree Village is a swath of land covering 2,500 acres.
We decided that we would do some research. We decided that we'd have a discussion over the said piece of land and see how we could liaise with the authorities and make the land available. There's many ways of acquiring land and making land available for your people if you're serious about it. Every time you go to the lands department, you ask for a piece of land, the land government will tell you none of them, go look for a piece and bring it back to your attention. Many times you do that, the information you're giving get issued out to somebody else and somehow somebody else ends up with the land. Now people need to stop acting the fool as if they don't hear or know that there are things that happen. There are things that happen a long time.
And that's part of the frustration that prompted a throng of residents from Cotton Tree and other parts of the country to descend on this location on Sunday. They all have a keen interest in owning land here, despite the fact that its title holder passed away some time ago without leaving behind a beneficiary. There is a process which must be followed in order for the land to be reapportioned. To understand the rush for property in Cotton Tree, one must first appreciate its proximity to Belmopan. The administrative capital of the country is only a few miles away. The village is also expanding at a rapid pace, and land is quickly becoming scarce.
The people need to come out here too, man. People want a piece of land, and then people want to take this far away. They want to give it to the big business places, man. So we need that acres of land, man. We need to do farming, man.
And the problem is that by the time the state of emergency is over, these pieces of land is already gone, sold already. So we are just trying to prevent this to happen. So that's the reason why we came in Consolidarity, gather up together to catch the government's attention.
Of equal importance is its ethnic composition. Cotton Tree is a mixed population of immigrants and native Belizeans, Hispanics, as well as residents of Creole descent.
That same individual who was an immigrant about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, own a piece of land, maybe one whole farm too, educated, they do very good. That's what we want to see for we Belizean people too. We know the power we land give you, we know the freedom we land give you, we know the independence we land give you. We understand that owning a piece of land will definitely change your life and you break the generational curse that many of us have been going through.
In a release issued by the Ministry of Natural Resources on May 11th, It reiterated the illegality of squatting on national and private lands. It also acknowledged that, quote, unauthorized individuals are involved with private lands in the agricultural area of Cotton Tree Village, near Benny's Warehouse, at mile 44 on the George Price Highway, unquote. Despite a warning from government for persons to be cautious about engaging in activities resulting in the illegal disposal of land and unauthorized occupation, many turned out on Sunday to see what, if any, land can be acquired. Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
We'll have a look at the local tourism industry later in the newscast. But tonight, the news for hundreds of employees at a local airline is not good. Tropicair is reportedly sending home more than 200 employees, including long-standing ones who have been employed at the company for years. The COVID-19 pandemic struck a blow to the entire sector, and the airline was no exception, so the layoffs are now starting. Tropicair had to be grounded until the recent softening of state of emergency restrictions. Coming up, Belize is the only country on mainland America without COVID-19 patients, and we'll tell you what government is doing to prepare for Belizeans returning home.
Yeah, where to go on?
You walk, my dog?
Yeah, at the car, at the car.
Everybody has provider.
Belize now stands as the only country on the American mainland without a new case of COVID-19. That's because today Suriname recorded a positive case after 44 days of no confirmed cases. It is exceptional news coming out of the region, especially for Belize, which has been able to contain the first wave of the virus and is now 36 days since its last recorded positive case. But there are concerns that this can change once Belizeans stuck abroad start returning home. To this end, a COVID-19 controlled repatriation for displaced Belizeans abroad website has been created as the government prepares for citizens, including students, to return home by the end of May. But approval must first be sought from government by the individuals. For weeks now, students have been stranded, having completed courses, but could not return home since the airport and borders are closed. Today on Open Your Eyes, Director of Health Services Dr. Marvin Manzanero spoke about the testing protocol for returning Belizeans.
That's being coordinated with Immigration and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have that already plan set in place in terms of what will happen once they start arriving. We want to do it in an orderly kind of fashion. We don't want everybody to come at the same time because so the first thing they're taking is trying to get a census. That's the reason why people are asked to fill a form. They will be able to come and where they actually live, because for now the only entry points would seem to be the northern and western border, but most of the flow is actually coming to the northern border station. So that's where we anticipate we're going to be having a higher number. One of the plans is to see if we can move people not only to Orange Walk, but also to Belize City, which is where we have the bigger hotels where people can stay. We would not be screening people with a test upon arrival.
I was going to ask that. Yeah. They won't be tested when they arrive?
Not unless you have a sign or symptom. And we have had this discussion in the region to see how we would do it and how other countries are doing it. And it doesn't really make sense to swab arrival if you're still going to go to a quarantine facility, because we're going to assume you're negative. When will we swab you is at day 14 when you're ready to come out, because if you're negative, then you are free to go. But because if I swab you and you're negative, you're still going to go to a quarantine facility. So you might just not be doing anything with doing a test upon arrival.
More than 830 people have signed an online petition to call on San Pedro officials to put a stop to a proposed water taxi terminal in downtown San Pedro. The San Pedro Belize Express water taxi, the biggest operator on the island, acquired the Ruby's Hotel property. That property, it is being reported, will be transformed into a water taxi terminal for this operator. But many residents have opposed the proposed project. 4 years ago, the almost $7 million San Pedro Sunset Boardwalk and water taxi terminal was completed. Yet local water taxi operators are not using the terminal. This latest proposed facility by San Pedro Belize Express has angered many residents who've been voicing their concerns over the past couple days. San Pedro resident and businessman Peter Lawrence created the online petition to galvanize support to put a stop to the proposed development. On Saturday morning, Lawrence discussed this project on Reef TV.
The San Pedro Express moving to the Ruby's dock or a new dock or whatever they're going to do, but they are going to move to Ruby's. I have been informed by a number of senior politicians in Belize that it's been given the green light. And you know, we can all say, you know, oh, well, they do. According to the area representative, whose nephew, you have to remember, owns part of the company, because he got given, I don't know how he got given the permit, but he got given the permit to run the ferry service. And obviously it is very, very profitable. But the minister came in, he didn't say his nephew, but he did say that we owed them a huge vote of thanks for helping over over the coronavirus crisis? Well, I don't know. All I knew is they were closed. I mean, that probably helped. That was probably what he meant. So they closed down so they didn't bring anybody to the island, even though I thought people were banned from coming to the island. But what do I know? I mean, thank you. Is he thanking them for following the law? Possibly. Now, the other thing, so if they do move, it's going to be an absolute living disaster for the town. Now, the mayor told me years ago, when it first came up and they bought Ruby's, that this was their idea, and he would never, ever let it happen. Now, all we need is the mayor to tell us it will never, ever happen. Then we should all be happy, and then we can force them back to the marina at the back, which is what it was built for.
During the program, Lawrence summed up a few of the concerns about the project. He says that traffic congestion, safety for students, and other concerns show that this is not a feasible project downtown and in front of the island.
The golf carts. All the golf cart companies have 10 golf carts out there. We have like 1,000 golf carts that aren't actually rented, but they're there to be rented to the tourists as they come off the boat. It's a bloody disaster. We need to keep them at the back. Now, there are 1,200 students in the school at least, and they're aged between 4.5 to 12, and it's pretty much disastrous. They do not teach the highway code. They don't tell you to look right, left, right. They run across the road. Now we're going to have every single taxi driver, every red top, every paedophile, and we have a lot of paedophiles, by the way, which, look at the papers, how many people get caught, certainly. And we've got all of these, and they're going to be just looking and sitting on the beach, just looking at everything. They're then going to take away the 60-foot of Queen's Beach, and then they're going to use all of that.
We tried to reach Mayor Daniel Guerrero for a comment today, but were unable to do so. They say there are always two sides to every story, and on Monday we brought you the side of Assistant Superintendent of Police Aaron Gamboa. ASP Gamboa and Junior Officer PC Mark Rodriguez got into a physical altercation on Saturday night in Camalote Village. ASP Gamboa says that Rodriguez was driving recklessly on the George Price Highway and set chase after him. Both men, along with officers, arrived in front of Rodriguez's residence where the fight occurred. But according to Rodriguez, he was not driving recklessly. He says that he had picked up his common-law wife, who's a nurse, after she had completed her shift when the matter escalated.
Upon him entering Alfida Road, a black pickup joined by, at the time, Aaron Gamboa, Assistant Superintendent of Police, along with his son, ran me down, stopped me, took me out of my truck, put me in the passenger seat, drive to my house, took me out. Okay. So when they took me out, I still see the Gamboa's son, one who is a police officer, likewise too, right? He still sit in my vehicle and was moving my vehicle. So I tell him, no. I tell him, where are you going with my vehicle? I then tell him, if anything do my vehicle, I will sue him personally, right? And that's when the whole commotion, However, I would say about 2-3 minutes after, the black pickup drove back with Mr. Gamboa, Assistant Superintendent of Police, Corporal Warrior, another police constable arrived at my yard. And well, that's where a commotion started, and they dumped me in the vehicle back. I have a problem, to solve it with my head, right? Like today, I'm giving this interview. I should be in Belize because I'm about to go on the medical board, right? Okay, they took me and they beat me in that vehicle senseless. My hand was swelled up. They stand up in my groin. I had, pain. Well, as you can see, my neck, where he grabbed me and he squeezed me. I still have, a little problem swallowing.
PC Mark Rodriguez was arrested and charged for several offenses, including state of emergency violations and for refusing to provide a specimen. He was arraigned and released on bail on Monday. Rodriguez says that aside from being a victim of police brutality, he was charged unfairly for offenses he did not commit.
6 charges. One is unable to provide reason for movement outside of curfew. Assaulting a police officer, who is namely Aaron M. Gamboa, right? The assistant superintendent. Harm against the same Aaron Gamboa. Reckless driving. Okay, well that's from Carpal Wire because he pressured the Carpal to leave it as these charges, right? Okay. Failed to provide specimen, chin blood or urine, right? And indecent words against the said Aaron Gamboa. Okay, man, if I park at my house, in my house already, I don't see, and that was from a little bit just after 7, right? I know the curfew is from 8 the night until 5 in the morning, right? However, it was just after 7, right? Not yet. No, my vehicle parked in my yard. I am in my house, you know. Well, the son for Mr. Gamboa, he was there still, right? But he told me he said to go inside. He said tomorrow he will talk to me about the vehicle. So he wanted to take the vehicle. So no, but the reason for failure to give him specimen, right? The Carpal that charged me, he didn't stop me driving no vehicle, you know. So, and that's why, hence the reason, that's why I failed to give a urine, because I tell her, I am in my house, Carpal, you know, Mr. Gamboa brought you here. Did you see me driving any vehicle? You know, to level that charge, right? He said, no. We said, well, let's go. He said,
According to Rodriguez's wife, Krista Zelaya, the dispute between both parties is personal. She says that Gamboa has reportedly been developing her land, which was passed down from her father. Zelaya contends that the land belongs to her, and that caused the escalation of the feud.
One day I did at work, my mama called me on the net, and she informed me that you need to go talk to people where they work on the land. Which people where they work on which land? I did on the land. Then she said, no, he said the next land for your pa. I said, yes, nobody done the work on it. She said, yes. She get information from the villagers that Gamboa, Mr. Aaron Gamboa, the work on the land. So when they don't know, I tell she, why don't put me in a position if we go deal with this land? Because you are the older one. You are the rightful one to deal with it, and you the administrator. I want to get the administrator if they deal with the lands them. So when I said, okay then, I went. When I come after work, I still never want to go. My come and say, you know what, it no make sense I go deal with that then because you put yourself in a thing, and the truth, if I may only listen, I no go. But I know make me plan go like that. So I said, you know what, make I go. I can kind as I can the Mr. Gamboa house, but they're only 1 block away from me. I gone and I find a wife home. The wife come out and I talk to Miss Charlotte. So I said, Miss Charlotte Gamboa, I can look for him, talk to you about the land. I tell him, I earn the work for my land, but you know the land belongs to my pa, no can't work on it. Then she say, no, he say, in an innocently baby voice, no, my pa give me that for another baby. I say, Miss Charlotte, that 2 big woman they talk here. That land belongs to my pa because I have papers to the land. I got pictures how Gamboa throw 2 load of big sand, white sand up there, knock down my pa foundation. How can I think this policeman they do? When they don't know, I don't make no noise. I don't talk to them nice, everything. I don't. He come to my house the next day after, no, 2 days after, and he come and say, my father-in-law want to see you. Mr. Gamboa, you know me not going to go out of my house. I live here, tell your father-in-law you want to see me come here. When they don't know, when I tell Gamboa that, Gamboa say, and I tell him, between that I tell him, I don't gonna land, I ask you please stop work on the land. Wait, make we see what happen, make we know, get to the bottom of this. You lied! Who the F is you to tell me I lied? I had to cuss him because you no can't disrespect me in my yard. He come away in my yard and can't call me lied. And that I find, and when he is, you cuss me or not, I say, because you disrespect me. Then when he reverse, he said, this not done yet, and he continued and he gone, and this not done yet. And what are you doing?
After the break, Director of Health Services explains the challenges with the reopening of the PGIA. The government of Belize, the Public Service Union, and the Belize National Teachers Union are now on the same page. All sides have agreed to the word forgo as the negotiations on government's cost-saving measures during the COVID-19 pandemic comes to an end. GOB had proposed that public officers and teachers forgo their salary increment for this fiscal year and have it calculated into their retirement benefits later on. The unions, however, had an issue with the word forgo, believing that defer would be the better choice of word. After several meetings, cooler heads prevailed and the unions agreed to forgo their increment with the view to have it calculated later on in their pension benefit. News 5 spoke to BNTU National President Elena Smith for an update.
So you agreed to the word forgo?
Yes. In the discussions that we had with the Prime Minister and his team, both sides shared the reasoning for their position. And we also shared with them our understanding, if you will, or our interpretation of forgo and defer. In the discussions, the Prime Minister eventually said, okay, he understood what we meant, and so he said, okay, fine, I'll accept the word defer, and so he used the word defer in our discussions. However, when the written document came to us, it said forgo. So that was a little back and forth that we were having, because we thought that in the discussions that we had with the team, that they saw the reason why we were saying defer, and that they had accepted that defer and forgo, the way it was being worked out, would have been the same. We discussed the matter after it came back to us, and we still had some questions and some clarifications, and we said, well, we would then accept the word forgo, because it still contained the other portion which said that at the time of your retirement, or whenever it was time for you to receive your benefits, that amount lost would then be added to that for your calculation, so that you would not lose anything at your gratuity or at your pension time.
When the dispute became public, the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry weighed in, saying that the unions were out of touch with the current reality of COVID-19 and the detrimental effects it has had on thousands of Belizeans. The sentiments of the chamber were interpreted as a scolding of the PSU. And today, Elena Smith told News 5 that the chamber was out of line since it had no idea about the status of the negotiations at the time.
The chamber had no idea what we discussed in our meeting. Nobody reached out to us to find out from us whether the press conference that the Prime Minister had and what he said was so, and what was the reason behind, if it is that we were back to square one, what was the reason. So for the chamber to put out a release, to be saying those things about, I believe they were referring to PSU, I think was quite unfair, because they could have reached out and they would have been able to get more information.
Do you believe that the Chamber's press release was out of place, or was it a clap back to what the PSU president, First Vice President, had said, that the private sector had failed to pay, I think it was 48 or 52% of taxes to the government?
Possibly, but you see, we have to remember one thing. They always say when you point the finger, and one comes back at you. And so if it is, for example, that we are saying that the public officers are not doing, or they're not properly collecting, or they are being bribed, if that is so, who does the bribing? They don't bribe themselves, right? So sometimes we have to be careful when we accuse persons of things, because we might be implicating ourselves in those things.
And while public officers and teachers are foregoing their increments, will they face retrenchment? At his press conference last week, the Prime Minister said he will borrow as long as he can to avoid retrenchment. But Barrow predicted that whoever succeeds him as Prime Minister will have to speak to the IMF and IFIs in terms of economic recovery. He said that any chance of further commercial borrowing is shot, and international financial agencies will seek to extract their pound of flesh, and the future government would have no choice but to cut down the wage bill, proceed with retrenchment in the public sector, and follow through with a pension reform. This prescription, he recalled, was offered to the government for many years, and according to Barrow, the government will not be able to continue to act heedlessly. BNTU President Elena Smith says the Barrow administration was given the same advice several years ago, but nothing was done.
Every time we meet with the IMF, they come with these same type of discussions. The wage bill is too high. Government needs to look at the pension. They have to do some retrenchment. It's always ideas suggestions that affect the workers. And we keep saying to them when they come to us that the government needs to look at why the wage bill is so high, the number of contract officers that they have, and the political appointees that they have, those persons who are supportive of their party, who when they win they feel that they must give them a job. Those are the things that add to the wage bill, as well as we have so many persons now that form the government, the different ministers and junior ministers and those types of things. All of those things are adding, because when those persons have to leave and get their huge packages, it adds to the wage bill. And so it would not be the ordinary public officer or the regular public officers who would be the ones to be ballooning the wage bill. It's all of those additions.
The Prime Minister, he said that any chance of further commercial borrowing is shut, and so whoever comes after him will need to talk to the IMF, IFIs, to see if any loan or any economic recovery can happen. And those financial institutions will, in his words, collect or extract their pound of flesh. He said that they won't give the assistance that the government would require, except if they say you will no longer be able to proceed as though you are heedless, meaning that in the past year the government was acting heedless under his administration.
Exactly. Which government was that for the past 12 years? So now it was under your government, and now that you know that you are going to be leaving, now you are telling us, well, I am sorry for you, I will pray for you, I pity you because of what will come. But what will come has to do also with you for the 12 years that you were there.
COVID-19 has had a severe impact on the economy, resulting in massive layoffs, especially so in the tourism industry. The BTB was among the first to cut back on its staff, and this week the local Tropicair is sending home hundreds of employees. In some Caribbean countries, such as the Bahamas and Barbados, tourism generates upwards of 70% of its GDP. In Belize, it contributes over 40%. Airports and hotels remain closed. Unemployment is increasing, and it is not known when tourism-related jobs will bounce back. But the impact extends beyond the tourism industry. The agro-processing and transportation sectors have also been battered by the pandemic.
I know that in general terms, we've been impacted by the loss of revenues. Stakeholders are in dire financial constraints right now. Some of them have to take out loans. They've had to lay off workers. BTB itself had been impacted in that way, where we had to part with some of our, what we call our BTB family. And it's amazing because this is a health pandemic, and you see the ripple effect. Every sector of the economy, not just tourism. When you think about every other type of business entity that has been impacted, because people are just spending less, they're more careful with their resources. It just shows the impact that it has had across all sectors of the economy. So it's definitely a pandemic we have never seen in our lifetime. It's going to be quite a lesson in history for us as we go forward.
Last week, Prime Minister Dean Barrow announced a tentative date for the reopening of the Philip Golson International Airport to allow for international visitors to resume travel to Belize. July 1st is the earliest date on which the airport can reopen. Director of Health Services Dr. Marvin Manzanero says that the reopening of this port of entry will pose a challenge, even if the country has rapid testing capabilities.
Question that has a changing answer, I would say, every day. We are in discussions with counterparts in the region because other Caribbean countries. So looking at that, I can't say that it's the same thing for Central America, because most airports are now at least partially open for commercial flights. I know neighboring Cancun, for example, never really locked down the airport. Yeah. So for us, we might be the ones in the region. I don't know if there's a straight answer, because we are still looking at process flows, how potential arriving patients or passengers would be coming through the airport. We have had an initial discussion with BTB
Have we
and
acquired the
airport
rapid
security.
tests yet? Sorry to interject.
No, we don't. No, we don't have. But even if we have a rapid test, we still have to look at the process flow, because how rapid will the result be? If you have a flight coming in of 180 people and you have to swab all of them, I mean, that's a delay already in terms of getting them through the airport. If anyone turns out positive, you have to send that sample for a confirmation to the central medical lab. Then does that mean you quarantine the entire plane until you have that result? Those are the kinds of questions that keep popping up.
While health experts foresee challenges with the reopening of the Philip Golson International Airport, there is optimism at the Belize Tourism Board about international tourists being able to return to the Jewel. In fact, they have launched the Dear Belize website that allows for persons in the main markets for the country, the US, Canada, and the UK, to participate in an opportunity to win a vacation in Belize when international flights resume. BTB's Giselle Stephen says that they are also keeping Belize's name on the list of top destinations to visit.
We have been facing ourselves even prior to that. What we realized from the pandemic hit was that we needed to find strategic ways of keeping Belize top of mind. Right? We cannot make our visitors and potential visitors to forget this curious place. So we actually we promoted wanderlust. So we created that lust for Belize by sharing inspirational content. So we did weekly themed postcards that had the message of Belize awaits. We're just waiting for you when it's safe for you to travel and come back. And so we shared with them through that messaging our culture, our people, our natural elements around us, and adventure, right? And so every week we threw out a new postcard with a new image, and it was really well taken even by media. Media internationally was really hungry for what we were doing, and they kept asking our agencies for information on what we were doing. So that was one thing that we did. In addition to that, we worked with our local stakeholders here to produce virtual videos. So one of the things we have different chefs that can cook delicious meals. So whether it was them cooking up a fried jack or something, we did a video of that. They themselves produced that video, and we were able to share that. We had cultural music with Clayton Williams. We also had a bartender that did their own concoction and drinks. And we also have the wellness aspect. So we had a yoga instructor give a series of yoga videos, right? It's all in keeping Belize top of mind.
Jose Sosa, a Salvadoran construction worker, was nabbed in Belize City this morning. When he failed to present documentation he entered the country legally, he was escorted to the magistrate's court. That's where Senior Magistrate Tricia Pitts Anderson read him a charge of failure to produce a visitor's permit and found him guilty. Sosa was fined $1,000 plus $5 cost of court to be paid immediately. He could not pay the fine, and immigration officers transported him to the Hatterville prison to serve 6 months imprisonment, which was the penalty for not paying the fine. At the end of his prison term, Sosa will be deported to his home country. There's much more news after the break, so stay tuned. With the borders and the international airports still closed, local tourism is being promoted across the country as the first step before international visitors begin making their way back to Belize. On May 15th, the BTB launched its plan to have heads in beds as the tourism industry attempts to rebound from COVID-19. Here is News 5's Dwayne Moody with this report.
As early as January, Belize began feeling the effects of COVID-19 as properties started receiving cancellations from international and local visitors. With over a month since the last positive case has been recorded in Belize, domestic traveling is now permitted, and the Belize Tourism Board and its industry partners have teamed up to once again launch the Belizean Traveler Campaign.
Every year around June, July, we launch a Belizean Traveler Campaign because domestic tourism is important. We want to have heads in beds all year round. So we see the Belizean Traveler Campaign as an important one in part of our marketing strategies. In every country that has been impacted by this pandemic, the first step is local tourism before they move on to international tourism. And that's because also even international travelers are more comfortable traveling within their own space first before they step out and resort back to international travel. So understanding that we had been working behind the scenes for a while on what would be the best campaign to offer considering COVID-19. And so we came up with this year's campaign, which will focus primarily on stakeholder participation and promoting what the stakeholders are offering.
BelizeBooking.com is a website that has been created to access all the great deals that Belizeans can take advantage of. You can also check out Belize Vacation and Belizean Traveler pages on Facebook for information on great adventure tours and activities that can be added to your stay from now until August of this year. Marketing and Industry Relations Manager Giselle Stephen says that industry stakeholders, including properties and tour companies, have dropped their prices significantly and the head tax is not being charged.
This year's campaign, we'll be focusing on developing a microsite for our stakeholders. So on this website, promote their hotel, their rates, and any kind of services they'll be offering for local travel. The website is already up. It's BelizeanBooking.com. And you can go on that website and you can search if you have a desired destination. You can actually search and put in maybe Cayo or Placencia, and it will pull up the hotels that are there. We had reached out to our stakeholders when we were working behind the scenes, and approximately 63 of them have already come forward and said they're going to be open, and they were sharing some of the rates with us. And so far, 26 of them are already up on that microsite. We actually have prices that can fit varying budgets, preferences, right? And so we do want to thank all the stakeholders, all the hotels that have come forward and said we want to be a part of this because we understand how important it is to rebuild domestic tourism.
Now, domestic tourism only contributes to 10% of the revenue collected by hotels and resorts. The remaining 90% is from international tourists, overnight visitors, and cruise ship passengers who disembark when these vessels call to port in Belize.
We recently did a survey, and the main reason for people not traveling was they didn't have time or they didn't have an interest, right? It really wasn't the expense. Expense is one, but it wasn't the immediate two, the first two. And that stood out for us because it showed us that people need to be aware of what they have. Our appeal to the Belizeans today is we are in this together, right? And the more that we spend locally, the faster we can recover. Because by spending locally, you're helping that business to actually regain, their footing. You're helping them to expand again so they can start to rehire those who they may have let go.
Dwayne Moody for News 5.
As the Belize Tourism Board promotes local tourism, it is also getting ready for the day when international visitors arrive at the PGIA. It is collaborating with the Ministry of Health, the Belize Hotel Association, and other industry partners to develop a property manual that will ensure that hotels and resorts put in place sanitation measures and processes to avoid any risk of COVID-19. The manual takes into consideration international standards and best practices. Marketing and Industry Relations Manager Giselle Stephen of the BTB says that a first draft should be available in the coming weeks.
It's important indeed for us to have these protocols and measures in place because this is what travelers will be looking for. They want to travel safely, right? And we have worked also in collaboration with a consultant, and he's developing for us what would be like a manual, so to speak, of what would be those procedures. Protocols on social distancing, whether it's sanitation rules and processes. It will encompass everything that's necessary for us to maintain that level of safety and to ensure that we're on par with world standards as well, right? We hope that in the next few weeks it will be available for public dissemination. Of course, once we have finalized and compiled it, we would then have to have training and awareness for the industry on how to implement and to use these.
Coming up after the break, wildlife contributes significantly and adds value to the tourism industry. Tonight we look at the melting pot of birds.
Yeah, where to go?
You walk, my dog?
Yeah, at the car,
Everybody has that one.
The quality and long-term viability of the natural environment are critical to tourism businesses across the world. Marine animals, birds, and wildlife contribute significantly and add value to Belize's tourism industry. Birding, for example, has been on the rise in the last few years, but birds across the world are under threat. While Belize has done a good job in its conservation and management efforts, there is a lot more that needs to be done to reduce the threats from poaching, illegal fires, deforestation, unsustainable development, and other man-made activities. Tonight we take a look at birding with experts in the field. Here's the story with News 5's Andrea Polanco.
Nearly 3 billion birds have disappeared from the skies. The journal Science published a report in September 2019, which revealed the staggering decline in bird populations since 1970. This report focuses on that 29% loss of breeding birds in North America. But bird expert Dr. John Fitzpatrick of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology explains how this impacts a country like Belize.
What this tells us is that we are not in balance. And that we are at risk of actually seeing these numbers continue to go down and ultimately causing some real problems in terms of what they reflect in terms of our landscape. Belize bird population is a really interesting one. Just like the people, this is a culture, a melting pot of cultures of birds. Some of them resident, some of them locally migratory within the tropics, and many of them, as you've just pointed out, migrating in from breeding grounds in North America where they'll spend more than half their year here. That study that indicates the loss of breeding birds in North America clearly indicates that Belize itself is losing birds because many of those birds are birds that winter here.
Threats to birds vary. Things like climate change, illegal logging, development, loss of habitat, and poaching are just a few of the factors that threaten birds' species. Author of Birds of Belize, Dr. Lee Jones, has seen this firsthand, how a species has pretty much vanished from Belize.
One bird that apparently has gone extinct since I've been here, it was in the mountain pine ridge, the eastern bluebird. It wasn't common, but it hasn't been seen now in 12 years. And I think that's from habitat destruction. It's bark beetle infestation, the fire regime, a number of things that have caused its extinction, whether that was natural or whether that was man-induced or what. But yeah, there are a few things. Extinction is final. I mean, when something's gone, it's gone. A lot of things that have gotten rarer, but they're still hanging on.
Although birds face an increasing number of threats, Belize is still at the forefront of bird conservation, and this has helped to propel birding as a growing tourist offering. In 2018 alone, an estimated 30,000 tourists visited Belize for birding activities. And that in turn has also helped to raise the importance of birds in Belize.
We probably have more habitat or forest reserves and intact habitats per unit area for the country of almost any place, anywhere. And even though we talk about habitat destruction and all the things that go with that, it's minimal compared to Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras and places around us, which also feeds into the tourism. People come to Belize because they know that's where they get all these rare birds that they're not so rare in Belize, but they can't get elsewhere.
This is an amazing country for getting people engaged in birds, which in turn gets them engaged in thinking about the natural systems. That's a model for how countries could be moving all over the world. So Belize is really in a leadership role in that way.
But there must be continued conservation and protection efforts to maintain healthy populations of birds, which in turn will sustain birding for tourism purposes. Fitzpatrick says that each person can play a part.
One of the things that every citizen can do is think about your daily behavior in terms of what you consume. Use less plastic. We should not be using plastic straws anymore. We should be using recyclable, reusable materials on everything that we eat and drink so that we have less pollution of the landscape. We pay attention to whether our landscapes are cleaner, whether we are actually encouraging local individuals to grow plants, native flowers, native vegetation that allows these migratory birds and some of the resident birds to live and be safer. And the other thing is just get out and enjoy it and spread the word, because the more the populace in general understands that Belize is a magical country for birds, then the better the chances are that Belize as a whole, from the politicians and government officials on down to local individuals and private individuals, the more the country itself enjoys and rejoices in what you've got, the better off these birds are going to be.
Reporting for News 5, I'm Andrea Polanco.
Later this week, we'll tell you how Central America is working to expand birding opportunities as a regional tourism offering and what opportunities exist for Belize. And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at News 5 Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us, and from all of us here at News 5, please remember to wash your hands, keep your social distance, and stay safe. Good night.